Welcome back. This is part 2 of our perspective demos. This time we're going to talk about two-point perspective. If you haven't watched the space presentation or the one-point perspective videos, I recommend you go start with those. Make sure that you've got those under your belt, and then we're going to dive into two-point perspective here. So, big difference between one and two-point perspective, this is going to sound really straightforward and simple, is one-point perspective is using one vanishing point, whereas two-point perspective is using how many vanishing points? 2 vanishing points. I know, really simple idea. I'm still going to start with my horizon line. Another way we could do that is like our eye line. So if we're kind of inside, we're going to play around with that. But that line is going to be where I'm going to drop my vanishing points. I'm going to put them both kind of far out on either side, because if I put them together, it's going to shrink down the usable space that I have, and I don't want anything to limit how much space I have except for that piece of paper itself, and sometimes I don't even let the paper limit me. Let my drawings just flow out onto the table. So, with one-point perspective, we started with the shape or the face of an object. So if we were looking at like this yardstick sitting straight at us, we might start with that rectangular prism at the front of that yardstick and then draw it going back to one vanishing point, no matter how we've got that here. Now with two-point perspective, we're going to be using 2 vanishing points. So what we're going to look at is we're going to kind of, if we're looking instead of at the face of a thing, we're looking at it slightly turned, so we're seeing that front angle or that front edge. So if I were wanting to like draw a city or a block on a street, I'm going to have the front corner of a building. For me, I want this going down nice and far, and I want it extending above my horizon line. If you want to pop in and open studios and talk about what happens as we look at the shapes that are non-traditional here, we can. And then with two-point perspective, I'm going from both the top and bottom of each of these shapes off towards my vanishing point. Now I'm not going to go all the way because, to be quite frank, I don't need my space to be quite that big. But I've got this coming off a little ways, both top and bottom, going off to my vanishing point. And then I'm going to finish it with a straight parallel line to the front edge of my building down to that bottom. Now what I've done here is I've made a nice, tall, narrow building, something that looks kind of like a skyscraper. If it's hard for you to see it, once you've got those buildings or those shapes drawn, you can use your eraser to pull out that horizon line behind, and that might help pop that sucker out. Another thing, if you didn't catch it in the first one, is our brains aren't good at understanding depth as we're looking down. And so if you hold your paper up in front of you, hold it up at arm's length, and a lot of times that little shift from down to up is all your brain's going to need to like click what's happening here. So we've got this shape. If I wanted to, I could go ahead and say that the edge of this is going to be like a sidewalk that all my next buildings are going to fall on. So I've got a sidewalk going all the way back to my back vanishing point. And then from here, I'm going to just populate my city with more and more buildings. So I'm going to drop the next one. I'm going to choose to put this on the left side, and it's going to be a little bit shorter. I'm always starting with that front edge, and then I'm going to go back to the 2 sides with my top and bottom lines. Now, from my bottom left, I already have a line going to my vanishing point, so we are good with that. On my top left, I need to map that line out, and this is where I'm going to determine how big that building is. So I'm going to make it a little bit longer because I want this to be a nice long building there. And then I'm going from the top out to the right. Now, before I go off to the right there, I want to show you that this building is further back than this front building, right? This front building is closest to us. That next building is a little bit further back. So, as we go off to the right, what's going to happen here is this line is going to stop when I hit the edge of that building. See that? That's creating the sense of depth. That's creating that sense of space in this piece. I can erase my horizon line there. And then I'm going to do the same thing off on the bottom right. And this is going to make what looks like a little alley. Now, a lot of my Art 1 kids will oftentimes forget about that bottom line. But that bottom line is really important to help create the full edge of these structures. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to map down on the side here, pull out my horizon line. I now have a city with 2 buildings in it. I can do the same thing over on the right side. I can go further and do more buildings on the left. Maybe I want a really, really small building with a little bit of space between it. That's going to change how I'm looking at things a little bit. Bottom left already done. Top left going out. Top to the right over to my other vanishing point. If your ruler's not long enough, anything with a straight edge will work here. And then I'm going to finish this off. And then you might be asking yourself, I think Mr. Reynolds made a mistake, but I don't know what happened. So we can see, because that is lower than our horizon line, we're going to be able to see the top of that building. So what I'm going to do is, from this back edge, I'm going to go off to my opposite vanishing point as well. All of a sudden, boom, got the top edge of my building. Now, on the right side here, for those of you who are still with me, because I recognize that not everyone's been watching my videos, I'm going to do something a little bit funky over here. And I'm going to have a building that is levitating, or being abducted by aliens, or however we want that to be. So I'm going to go from the top down to the vanishing point on the right, from the bottom over to the vanishing point on the right. And I'm going to do the same thing over to the left, and then same thing over to the right. And then finish those edges up. Finish those edges up. Now on the bottom here, I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the top of this building, except on the opposite. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to have this cut across. And then the trick, when we see something fully like this, is we're going to go from both of those corners to create like our diamond in the back. So now I've got a building there. I could, if I wanted to, make this edge a little bit more jagged, or kind of round that out to make it look like it was like pulled up from the bottom. I could show some debris falling from that. I could even make a spot down here, like a giant hole where that building had been. We can play around with that. We have freedom. I am going to want to come in and add some details to these buildings. So we can add details the same way with 1 point perspective, where we followed our guide of our vanishing point. I want to make sure that we're following that guide with these and pivoting and rotating as we go up our building. So this skyscraper here, as I'm mapping these lines in, I'm pivoting and rotating my ruler, so that way I'm true to my vanishing point and marking these detail lines in on each of these sides. As we get further away from our horizon line, you'll notice that this angle becomes more and more extreme. And then on the opposite side, I would just do the same thing off of my vanishing point, rocking down. I could go on and on and on forever here, but I'm going to give you the set here. I'm going to give you this example. I'm going to set you free to go ahead and go do and draw yourself. If you need help, please do not hesitate to touch base with me or Mr. G. Touch base with your art teachers. We are here for you. Otherwise, happy drawing, and I will see you in class. Once I can find the stop button.